Fantasy is a vast genre that tends to encompass things like dragons, adventure, fantasy races, and dungeons. And though mainstream fantasy has been popular for a while and has fans raving and ranting, fantasy has mostly left me feeling a little bit meh. Not because I'm not interested in fantastic battles, or fantastical races, or elves, or underdog stories. I mostly really enjoy all of those things. But something about mainstream fantasy has become really stiff to me, especially in the past decade. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but just look at all the anime that's under the fantasy genre on Crunchyroll. Usually fantasy and really popular anime tends to check off one of a few boxes. The first being it's an isekai, meaning that someone was reincarnated and usually killed by Truck-kun or some other inanimate object and then reincarnated into a new life where they have overpowered abilities. The other checkbox is that usually it involves a dungeon or it's based off an RPG game where there's a party of characters that get together and explore a dungeon. And yeah, the main character is almost always practically immortal and or extremely overpowered to the point that they can't be killed. So let me know how many series I just named off by just listening to the tropes of them. And honestly, this isn't that bad the first 10 times you see it. You know, the first 10 or so anime you see where this is kind of the main narrative, it's like, okay, this is still kind of fun to watch. This is okay. But once you start getting into the 50th, the 60th, the 100th time that we see these same series, anime or manga or manhwa or webtoon or webcomic, it starts to get tired. I mean, remember when the Villainess isekai series was kind of first starting to kick off? My Next Life as a Villainess, I think, was one of the first ones I had seen as an anime that got like a lot of attention. And everyone was like, oh, this is cool. This is like, it's a little bit different. You know, the girl is not being reincarnated into the main character, the good character. She is instead the villainess, and then you see like a few more come out, and then by the 10th time that you see another Villainous isekai series pop up on your seasonal anime, you're like, I think I'm good. I think I'm done. What's next? Isekai and fantasy aren't the only series that are suffering from the commodification of anime and manga. There are plenty of tropes and series that have been capitalized on because of their popularity and have been like really pushed, and to the point where people are now tired of them and are begging for something else, like literally begging, like I am begging Crunchyroll, please stop picking up these titles. I don't want them. I don't want to see them anymore. Give me something else. This year, my need for something more interesting, something more fantastical, like the worlds that I love reading in books, is finally kind of coming to fruition in newer anime. And I have been back on my fantasy kick. I got some elf ears. That's how deep I am into this love for fantasy that has reawakened in me from seeing the series that I'm going to talk about today. Two which are like full-fledged, basically already done series that fans have loved and have caused a little bit of controversy for how much fans have loved them. And then another series that has yet to be turned into an anime, but it will be turned into an anime. But I also want to talk about my concerns for that manga becoming an anime. The first series really needs no introduction. I mean, if you keep up with seasonal anime, you've probably heard of this series. Also, if you're a Full Metal Alchemist fan, if you're an Attack on Titan fan, you're probably upset that this series has been taking your fave spot on the My Anime list, like top tier anime for the past like couple months now. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is one of those stories that draws you in, not with its fast-paced, action, intensive introductions, but instead by starting at the calmest point of any story, which is usually the very end, the epilogue. If you want to get fancy and use literary words, I guess, I don't know, I might not even be using it right. I'm only a writer part-time. Anyway, Frieren is a mage and a mostly immortal elf, and her and her party return to their hometowns as heroes, where they split off to live the rest of their peaceful lives. As her friends quickly pass and she lives on, it is only in the wake of their deaths decades later that the influences of her journey with them become apparent. Not just in the flashbacks that the series seamlessly draws us into, but also in the present moment she spends with their new party members. Frieren starts off less like a typical fantasy and more like a typical iyashike. Iyashike is like a subgenre of anime and manga that represents like healing anime and manga series that don't really have major like battles or moments. Usually they're just calm, peaceful series that kind of puts you into a good mood. And fantasy usually does slip into the isekai genre. There are plenty of like more fantastical series that I think fit into this, but not so many that do it the way Frieren does. Let me break it down. Frieren literally starts at the end of a journey with her and her friends, and we're left kind of feeling like we've just watched 2 seasons of a beautiful, engaging, interesting adventure with these characters, and now it's coming to an end, except we don't know who these characters are. And we wonder, why do we care about these people? Why do we care if they die of old age? And what's up with this immortal elf who doesn't seem to give a fuck? But as time goes on, we learn more and more about the adventure that Frieren went on and how her friends have impacted her life, making her less distant and emotionally cut off, and more caring of the mortals that live around her. Though Frieren does eventually break away from its kind of like aimlessly wandering beginnings, it still is able to tie in the parts that make it kind of sweet, smooth, and slow that fans initially kind of fall for in the beginning, and including me, because I just love a series that's like knows that it doesn't need to like have a breakneck pace in order to be interesting. It could just start from the end. This journey does have trials and tribulations that fall into the trope of other battle tournaments, which fits its shonen origins, because if we didn't know, Frieren is a shonen. Of course, not to mention the demon baddies that fight Frieren and her party along the way. But I think the most important thing to remember, even as you watch the second half of the first season, when you see more of the battles and more of the tests with the mages and them having to battle one another, is that the main point of Frieren's current journey is not to lead up to a major battle with anyone. It is instead to find this place that allows her, this magic that allows her to talk to the people from her past. Frieren really treats immortality as the sad, lonely existence that it is, instead of the endless centuries of fun that we see often in reincarnation series. There's just so much emphasis on Frieren and her relationships in the story, and that is what draws me in. But for the next one, the thing that draws me in the most has to do a lot with heart, but mostly with my stomach. Dungeon Meshi was a surprise series I didn't think I'd care much about. And again, I blame the endless list of fantasy series that I've seen that I just have no interest in watching, because I feel like I know what exactly is gonna happen. But I gave it a try, and I absolutely fell in love with the first episode. Let me tell you, the way this series combines food, combines characters, combines fantasy and adventure. Ooh, I'm gonna get to that. But before that, I also want to talk about how Studio Trigger animated this series. And Studio Trigger is one of my favorite animation studios. A lot of the anime that they produce is original animation, meaning that it hasn't been adapted from a manga or a video game or other things. There's so many like original series that they've made that I was just really surprised to see that they were doing an adaptation of a manga for the series. But I freaking love it. I know nothing about the manga. I actually highly recommend that you go watch Lines in Motion, my friend Danny's video about the character designs and like why they're different and like the way that they are able to break down all of that. You definitely should go watch that. You probably already have, because I already know you have taste, but if you haven't, please do. Okay. The Trigger emphasizes that by really bringing out the humor and comedy and the actions and the movements of the characters. Doing a great job emphasizing the food, drawing the food. The art of the food is so delicious looking. Following a group of adventurers who return to a dungeon to save their party's healer, Laios, Marcel, and Chiltrak run into a dwarf named Senshi, who teaches them how to survive in the dungeon by feasting on the monsters there. Well, shoot, okay, yeah, I guess we're gonna just sit here. I'm gonna sit here for a whole 24 episodes and watch these characters eat dungeon monsters. The food presentation alone is enough to make you salivate. Never in my life have I ever craved a half chicken, half snake beast thing before until I've watched the series. I mean, who has? Even this little ugly thing, look at the picture of this. Look at this ugly little guy. Why does he look so delicious? Like, I want to eat it. But he's so ugly looking. But it's just, I feel like Marcel, like, she's like, no, I can't eat this ugly looking weird creature thing. It's gross and disgusting. but then she sits there and eats it. Me and Marcel, I feel her. We are connected spiritually. Again, Delicious in Dungeon doesn't take anything really new or different when it comes to at least anime and manga in kind of a general sense. Food has always been a kind of subtle but integral part of a lot of stories. Like, think of Ghibli movie scenes. Some of my favorite Ghibli movie scenes, off the top of my head, tend to be because the food looked really good and I craved it, but also kind of serve to emphasize important moments for the characters. Like the scene in Laputa, Castle in the Sky, where Shita and Pazu are sharing that toast with an egg on top. It's such a simple meal, but I freaking loved it. I never before had craved an egg on toast before. I don't know, I just never thought about that until I saw that scene as a kid. These two people, they come from literally two different worlds, are connecting over this meal. Even Sophie cooking eggs on Calcifer in Howl's Moving Castle. Yes, that scene looks delicious, and bacon and eggs have never looked that good in real life ever. I wish I could make my bacon and eggs look like this. But it also kind of casually shows how Sophie is able to feel more comfortable being herself, being unabashedly herself, even with this demon creature who devours hearts, than she did when she wasn't turned into an old lady, when she was her normal self and she was really shy and intimidated by everything. There's also an endless amount of spin-off manga specifically, and even sometimes they're turned into anime, where we see really major franchises specifically focus on characters and them making food and putting together recipes and eating together. Dungeon Meshi has taken the heart of what makes series centered on food both comforting and enjoyable, and weaves it into a tale that is also much bigger than recipes and characters sharing a meal. It makes food the heart of its fantasy. Just like food, the ecosystem of the dungeon, its creatures, and the adventurers who traverse its endless levels all tie back to nourishment, sustainability, and connection. Beyond just how deeply the mangaka was able to integrate food, there's also just really incredible characters for the series. It's cool to see that characters like Laios, who may or may not have autism or ADHD, but who audiences seem to kind of really appreciate seeing in a fantasy story. Marcel, who's my personal favorite, is the perfect combination of extremely talented mage and manic, I'm deeply in love with my best friend energy, and I just love her. I love her so much. Senchi's entire personality is making food and yelling at people for not respecting the food and where it came from. Dungeon Meshi is just a fun series that both doesn't take itself too seriously, but also continues to open up new secrets about its world in a way that sucks you in. Coupled with its hilarious character dynamics and ridiculous situations, it's an absolute joy to watch. Speaking of manga, the last series to capture my heart is still only a manga. However, it has been slotted to be turned into an anime soon, and I have some slight reservations about that, but I'm still pretty excited to see what it has to offer. This series embodies the innocent joy common in magical girl series, while also creating one of the most foreboding secret magical systems around. The story is centered around Coco, a young girl who dreams of being a witch, but in her world, witches have to be born with magical powers, and she was not. However, she meets a witch who reveals a secret of magic to her, leading her down the path to her dreams. The manga was created by Kamome Shirahama, a freelance artist who has worked on Marvel, DC, and Star Wars comics. On its surface, Witch Hat might seem like a story for younger audiences that may not match the current climate of dark series that are making waves. But don't let the naive characters and whimsical style fool you. The story isn't afraid to address discrimination and the powerful beings who exist in the shadows that keep a watchful eye on the magical system and who they deem worthy to use it. One of the biggest reasons Witch Hat has garnered a lot of attention is due to its creative use of paneling. The art of the manga breaks free from the boundary of the panels and seeps into every inch of the page, creating an immersive experience unlike any other. Sorry for throwing in a religious jump scare, but I remember learning about how Bibles used to be filled with printed artwork before literacy was common and accessible, and how the church would go door to door trying to convert people into Christianity by showing them otherworldly images of angels and heaven and hell that were so hauntingly alien and beautiful that people would join on the spot. Witch Hat Atelier is how you convert a non-manga reader into manga. There's this fantastical story mixed with this insane art that feels immersive and transcends what traditional manga is known to be. In fact, it's the detail of the art style and use of paneling that makes me hesitant to see how the series will be animated. The manga is a testament to how creatively the medium can be utilized in a way that can easily be lost in animation translation. But Witch Hat Atelier is a stunning fantasy series that takes everything great about magical girls, magic systems, and fantasy and puts them into a single series. I could say more, but much better discussions about the series have been done by some really cool people that will be on the screen here for you to go check out. These stories take basic elements of fantasy, animanga, novels, stories, movies, and things, and combine them with kind of key, kind of anime-esque, manga-esque elements that really kind of help them stand out and kind of really appeal to me more than anything, because what do I love more than characters and their bittersweet relationships with the people who have already passed, and characters who are bonding over food, the food they eat and the food they make. Like, those are my favorite things. I really appreciate that Frieren, Dungeon Meshi, and Witch Hat are so richly developed and deeply created with care. And they show an appreciation for fantasy that is sometimes lost in the commercialization of it that we often see in like really popular movies and shows and things. Thank you to my lovely patrons for helping me make this video possible. That brings us to the end of the video. Stay safe and maybe try falling in love with some fantasy anime like I did. You know, you'll never know until you try it. Okay, see you in the next one. Peace.